Billionaire found his maid studying late at night, then discovered her secret and changed her life forever. The mansion was silent, cloaked in darkness except for a single beam of light spilling faintly from the kitchen. The old grandfather clock in the hallway had just struck 2, an hour when even the restless usually surrendered to sleep. William descended the stairs slowly, barefoot, robe draped over his shoulders. He wasn't used to the quiet. Once, years ago, it had been filled with laughter, piano music, the rustling of pages as his wife read by the fire. Now it was silence and routine. Tea at 9, solitude by 10, insomnia by midnight. He wasn't expecting anyone else to be awake. As he turned the corner into the kitchen, he stopped. There, hunched over the marble island, sat Anna. She wore a loose sweater over her house uniform, sleeves rolled up, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Around her were thick medical textbooks, a spiral notebook filled with handwritten notes, diagrams sketched in ink. She didn't notice him at first, too immersed in her world of anatomy and chemical equations. William cleared his throat. Anna jumped, snapping the book shut, startled. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, rising to her feet. "I didn't think anyone would be awake." He raised a hand. No, it's fine. I just came down for some water, but what are you doing?" She hesitated, then lowered her eyes. "I was just studying." "At 2 in the morning?" "I have an exam tomorrow," she said quietly. "A placement test for an online program." William frowned slightly. "I didn't know you were taking classes." "I do it after work," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Only at night. I can't afford school here yet, but if I pass the exam, I might qualify for remote courses. It's a small chance, but I have to try." There was a pause. He glanced at the textbook nearest to him. Advanced Human Biology. "You want to be a nurse?" he asked. Anna looked up, and for the first time he saw it, the fire behind her usually lowered gaze. "A doctor," she said. William blinked. "I want to be a doctor," she continued, voice firmer now. "I've wanted that since I was a child." He studied her for a moment. She wasn't even 30. Small, polite, efficient. She cleaned the house, folded the laundry, never spoke unless spoken to. And yet here she was, burning the candle on both ends, chasing a dream that most would have abandoned long ago. "Why?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because when I was 10, my father got sick. We didn't have money for proper treatment. He died at home. I remember sitting beside him feeling useless. I promised I'd never feel that helpless again." William didn't respond at first. He just looked at her, truly looked. She wasn't asking for pity. Her voice wasn't broken. Her eyes didn't beg. She simply stood there, quietly brave, surrounded by the tools of a dream no one had handed her, one she was building with scraps of time, worn books and pure determination. "You're tired," he said softly. "Yes," she admitted. "But you're still studying." "Yes." He nodded once, as if processing a truth he hadn't been prepared to find in his own kitchen. "Well," he said after a moment, reaching for a glass of water. "Don't let me interrupt." Anna looked surprised. "Go on," he added, gesturing gently toward the notebook. "You have an exam to pass." Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. Then, slowly, she nodded, sat down, and opened her book again. As William turned to leave, he paused in the doorway, glancing back at her. This young woman with no time, no help, no guarantees, only grit. And in that moment, something shifted. He no longer saw the maid who washed his windows and ironed his shirts. He saw courage. He saw fight. He saw the seed of a future not yet written. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt something stir in his chest, something that had lain dormant since the day he buried his wife. Hope, admiration, maybe even the faint, unfamiliar ache of inspiration. In the silence of his own mansion, William Duval realized that the brightest light was coming not from chandeliers or wealth, but from a small kitchen lamp and the quiet, relentless flame of a dreamer named Anna. Anna's days began before the sun rose and ended long after the world had gone to sleep. At 5 a.m. she was already awake, preparing breakfast in the quiet kitchen, folding linens, organizing the pantry before anyone else stirred. By mid-morning, she was sweeping the long halls of the estate, polishing glass doors, scrubbing marble floors until they shone like mirrors. She moved with quiet efficiency, never lingering, never resting too long. At lunchtime, she served meals she didn't taste. In the afternoon, she tended the garden, wiped dust from bookshelves in rooms she was never invited to sit in. And when the household finally quieted for the night, Anna returned to her room, the smallest one near the laundry, with a creaky bed and a desk made of salvaged wood, and began her second life. Her textbooks were old, bought second-hand from online listings and shipped from the Florida. Her notes were scribbled in the margins of scrap paper, receipts, napkins she had saved from lunch. Her only light was a dim desk lamp that flickered when the air conditioner kicked in. But still, she studied. She practiced pronunciation of complex medical terms under her breath, afraid to wake the sleeping house. She watched hours of free lectures on YouTube, pausing and rewinding every few minutes to understand the terminology. Her internet connection often lagged, but she refused to complain. She couldn't afford the luxury of frustration. She would pause only to check her phone at midnight, a message from her younger sister, Mari, saying goodnight, a photo of their mother sleeping, looking thinner each week, a drawing from her youngest brother, Ben, showing Anna as a superhero in a white coat. She kept those messages as screensavers, tiny reminders of why she was doing this. She sent home nearly everything she earned. For medicine, for tuition, for food. She left just enough for instant noodles, toothpaste, and bus fare, though she rarely left the property. She hadn't bought new clothes in years. Her shoes had holes in them. She cut her own hair to save money. None of it mattered. She had a purpose. Her dream of becoming a doctor wasn't about ambition or prestige. It was about people like her father, who had died on a bamboo cot, sweating through a fever they couldn't afford to treat. It was about mothers in the province, waiting too long to give birth because there were no clinics. It was about giving children like Ben a better answer than, "We don't have the money." People told her it was impossible, that no one like her, brown-skinned, broke, a housemaid in a foreign land, could ever wear a white coat. But Anna didn't argue. She simply worked. Even on the hardest days, when her hands ached from scrubbing or her eyes burned from sleep deprivation, she never let the fire inside her dim. She carried her dream like a small, sacred ember in her chest. And William noticed. He didn't say anything, not yet, but he saw the way she moved with discipline, the way she snuck glances at her books when she thought no one was watching. He noticed the way she touched everything with care, even the furniture, even the floor, as if the world deserved gentleness no matter how hard it was. Anna never asked for more, not time, not money, not recognition. She didn't believe in handouts. She believed in doing the work. And she did, quietly, relentlessly, unapologetically. One night, as she sat at her desk, cross-referencing symptoms for a mock diagnostic test, she looked up at the ceiling and whispered to herself, "I'll get there, even if it takes me forever. I'll get there." She didn't know if anyone heard, but someone had, and for the first time in his life, William felt that perhaps true strength wasn't loud or powerful or adorned in medals. Sometimes, true strength wore an apron by day, a pencil in her hair by night, and carried the weight of a future no one else believed in, except her. It began with a second glance. At first, William had only observed Anna from a distance, casually, with the kind of detached curiosity that people of his stature often had toward those who quietly served them. But something shifted after that night in the kitchen. After seeing her huddled over medical books, eyes blazing with tired resolve, he found himself noticing her more closely. More often, he saw how gently she trimmed the hydrangeas in the back garden, as if they were living things with stories to tell. How she wrapped a dish towel around the handle of the hot kettle so the cook wouldn't burn his hand. How she noticed when the butler looked pale and left him warm soup outside his door with no name attached. She didn't speak much, but in the silence, she communicated something few people in William's world ever did. Awareness, kindness, not as performance but as instinct. He started asking her questions in passing, small, non-intrusive things at first. "How long have you been working here?" 3 years, sir. Before that, private homes. Always live in. It's easier for saving. Her answers were short, respectful. She never lingered, never assumed. But she was honest, and it was that honesty, clear, stripped of performance, that struck him. One evening, as he sat on the terrace nursing a cup of black tea, he saw her returning from the market with 2 bags in hand. Instead of handing them off, she stopped by the gardener, who was on his knees tending to a rose bush, and handed him a small box of balm for his knees. "You said they ached last week," she said softly, before disappearing into the kitchen. William didn't speak. But something stirred inside him. The next evening, as he passed the hallway near the study, he found her sitting by the open door of the service corridor, reading again. She looked up, startled, then began to stand. "No need," he said. "Mind if I join you?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Here?" "I like the quiet," he said, lowering himself into the opposite chair. She blinked, nodded, then closed her book. "No, don't stop on my account," he said. She hesitated, then opened it again. A few minutes passed in silence. Then softly he asked, "Do you miss the Florida?" She paused. "Every day." "Why don't you go back?" She didn't look up. "Because everything I need to become is still here." That night, they didn't say much more, but something passed between them, a thread. It became a pattern. A few nights later, he brought 2 cups of coffee to the same hallway. "This one's sweet," he said. "I wasn't sure how you take it." She smiled. "Sweet is good, thank you." They sat in silence, sipping slowly. Another evening, he asked her about her family. She told him about her mother, still recovering from a stroke, and her 2 siblings, both in school. How she sent them money every week. How she once wanted to be a teacher before switching dreams after her father's death. "Lynn died from a lung infection," she said quietly. "There was no doctor in our village. The nearest clinic was 2 hours away. By the time we got there, it was too late." William didn't speak. His hands curled slightly around the warm mug. "My wife," he said after a pause, "used to teach children in the city, every Saturday morning, rain or shine." Anna looked at him. "She died of cancer 5 years ago," he added. "Fast, aggressive. 1 month she was laughing at my bad piano playing. The next, gone." Anna lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry," he shook his head. "I've never told anyone that in this house." They sat together in that quiet for a long time. No pretense, no roles. Just 2 people who knew loss, understood endurance, and recognized it in each other. After that, their evening conversations became a quiet ritual. Some nights they talked about science, some nights about memories. Others, they simply sat, sipping coffee and sharing the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but filled with mutual understanding. William found himself looking forward to those hours. They weren't loud or dramatic, but in the gentle rhythm of Anna's presence, something within him began to thaw. He started to smile more, laugh at things he hadn't noticed before. One day, he caught himself humming a tune he hadn't remembered in years, and one night, as Anna handed him a mug of tea and their fingers brushed, just for a second, he felt a jolt, not of attraction necessarily, but of life. Something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. The kind of warmth that doesn't blaze like fire, but glows, steady and quiet. And for the first time since burying his wife, William Duval realized his heart was still capable of beating for something more than memory. It had begun to feel again, because someone, without ever trying to, had reminded it how. It started with a phone call. William sat in his home office one morning, sunlight pouring over old mahogany furniture and stacks of business reports he no longer cared to read. He picked up the phone and dialed a private number, one known only to a few close colleagues. "Dr. Patel," he said when the voice on the other end answered, "I need a favor." A week later, Anna was summoned, not to the kitchen, not to the garden, but to the library, where William rarely entertained staff. She walked in, nervously wiping her hands on the hem of her blouse. "Sir?" He didn't look up from the folder on the desk. "There's a hospital I've worked with for over a decade. They run a community outreach program on Saturdays. I've arranged for you to assist as a volunteer." Her eyes widened. Volunteer? In a real hospital? He nodded. You'll shadow nurses, help with non-critical tasks, observe, learn. It's only a few hours each week. She opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't find words. Think of it as practice for the future, he added, finally looking up. Her throat tightened. Thank you, she whispered. I'll work hard, I promise. He gave a small smile. I know you will. That Saturday, Anna arrived at the bustling city hospital in her simplest clothes, hair tied back neatly, eyes filled with nervous energy. She was introduced to a nurse named Claudia, who gave her a quick rundown of protocols and assigned her to the outpatient clinic. Anna didn't hesitate. She took blood pressure readings, helped fill out forms for elderly patients who struggled with English, calmed crying children in the waiting room, and disinfected beds between appointments. She moved with care but also with purpose, watching, absorbing, assisting where she could. By the end of the first day, Claudia approached her with a raised eyebrow. You said this is your first time in a hospital? Anna nodded, unsure if she'd done something wrong. You have better bedside instincts than some of our interns. Anna blinked. I just try to help like I'd want someone to help my family. Claudia stared at her for a second longer, then nodded. Come back next week, same time. Every Saturday after that, Anna returned. Early, eager, always ready to learn. She asked questions when appropriate, took notes in her small, well-worn notebook, and stayed longer than required. The staff began to recognize her. A few doctors even asked her opinion during rounds, not to test her, but because she paid attention. Meanwhile, William asked nothing. He didn't hover, didn't ask for updates, but each Saturday evening when she returned, he'd casually leave a cup of warm tea outside her door. No words, no notes, just quiet support. Then, one Thursday afternoon, William invited her once again to the library. This time there was a folder waiting on the desk. Anna approached slowly. Is something wrong? He gestured for her to sit. No, quite the opposite. She took the seat, confused. William slid the folder across the desk. Inside was an acceptance letter from a prestigious healthcare foundation tied to his company. It was addressed to her, a full scholarship to a 2-year pre-medical certificate program with a guaranteed pathway into a partner university's medical school if she passed. Her hands shook as she read. I don't understand, she whispered. I didn't apply for this. You didn't need to, he said. I did. She looked up, stunned. Why would you do that for me? William met her gaze, eyes steady. Because I see who you are becoming. Tears welled up in her eyes. You work harder than anyone I know. You've taught yourself more than some students with every advantage in the world. And you care, deeply, genuinely. That can't be taught, but it deserves to be nurtured. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to process it all. You don't owe me anything, he continued. This isn't charity, this is belief. You've earned every line of that letter. I just helped the world see it. I'm just, she shook her head, a housemaid. No, he said softly. You're a future doctor. You just need the world to catch up. That night, Anna didn't study. She sat in her room, staring at the acceptance letter, the seal embossed in gold at the top, her name printed in bold. All her life she had fought for scraps, for minutes to learn, for books to borrow, for the smallest sliver of a dream. Now, a door had opened, not by miracle, but by the quiet faith of someone who had seen her, not her position, not her poverty, but her potential. And that, more than any acceptance letter, was the gift she had never dared to ask for. Hope. Real, tangible hope, the kind that could build a future. Anna held the letter in her hands for days, folding and unfolding it, tracing her name with her fingertip, rereading each line until she could recite it in her sleep. A full scholarship, a real classroom, professors, labs, textbooks she wouldn't have to borrow, a future. But behind that golden seal was a cost she couldn't ignore. She sat at her desk late one night, calculator in hand, scribbling numbers on the back of an envelope. Tuition was covered, but rent back home wasn't. Nor were her mother's medications, nor the school fees for Marie and Ben. Every dollar she sent home from her maid's salary was already accounted for. If she left this job to study full-time, that lifeline would disappear. She placed her head in her hands. Could she really walk away? From the steady income, however small? From the people she had sworn to care for? Could she risk everything they depended on, just to chase something that still felt like a dream? The next morning, Anna asked to speak with William. He invited her into the conservatory, a quiet, sunlit space lined with potted orchids and ferns. She stood stiffly across from him, the acceptance letter clutched tightly in her hands. I don't think I can go, she said, her voice low. Not now. William looked up from the tea he was pouring. Why? I send money home every week. My mother's health depends on her medication. My siblings, they're still in school. If I stop working, they'll have nothing. I can't be selfish. He set the teapot down. Anna, what you call selfish, I call brave. She shook her head. They need me more than the world needs another doctor. He stood slowly, walked over to her, and gently placed a hand on the letter between her fingers. You've spent your entire life giving, and I admire that. But if you give up your dream to survive, you'll keep surviving and never truly live. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm not asking you to abandon them, he continued, but maybe it's time someone else helped carry the weight. Maybe it's time you became the person you were meant to be. She stared at him, trembling. No one's ever said that to me before, she whispered. I mean it. Silence settled between them like falling dust. Then, slowly, she lowered herself into the chair across from him. Her fingers loosened on the letter, her shoulders dropped. I'm scared, she said. I know, he replied gently. That's how you know it's worth it. Anna looked out the glass doors at the morning sun pouring across the garden. She thought of her father, coughing in the dark, her mother waiting for medicine, her sister drawing pictures of Anna in a white coat, her brother with wide eyes full of questions she never had time to answer, and she thought of herself, not who she had been, but who she might become. Finally, she nodded. I'll do it. William exhaled, a small smile touching his lips. Then the world just got luckier. She laughed through the tears, the kind of laugh that came from deep within, half joy, half disbelief. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You don't have to, he said. Just become who you already are. That night, Anna began to pack, not with fear, but with something else, courage. The quiet thrill of finally stepping into a life that had always felt just out of reach. She wasn't leaving her family behind. She was walking forward, for them and for herself. The first day at the Medical Foundation program felt like entering another world. Anna stood outside the campus building, her backpack slung over one shoulder, clutching a folder of documents. Around her, students stepped out of luxury cars, wore designer coats, carried tablets and noise-canceling headphones. Their conversations drifted through the crisp morning air, talk of vacations, private tutors, legacy admissions. She shrank slightly into her sweater, feeling the frayed edge of her collar like a spotlight. She walked quickly through the glass doors, head down, clutching her scholarship ID like a shield. In her first anatomy lab, she didn't speak. She took notes, listened intently, nodded when addressed. She didn't laugh with the others when the professor made a joke. She was too focused, too unsure if she even belonged. The other students barely noticed her. A few smiled politely. Most didn't ask her name. But Anna paid attention. She watched. She studied. She memorized every term, reviewed every night, practiced alone with flashcards and online simulations. She was always the first to arrive, the last to leave, quiet, invisible, but present, relentless. One afternoon, during a group case study, the instructor posed a challenging scenario about a rare immune disorder. The class hesitated, unsure. Anna raised her hand, soft but steady. The symptoms align with a variant of Job syndrome, she said. We covered it last week in the immunology reading. The room fell silent. The instructor blinked. That's correct. From that day on, the whispers began to shift. They started asking her questions, not out of condescension, but curiosity. Who was she? Where had she learned to think like that? Anna never gave long answers. She simply kept showing up over and over again, with precision, humility, and fire. Every month she wrote to William, not emails, letters, handwritten on lined paper, folded neatly into envelopes. She told him about her classes, her tests, her small victories. She thanked him in every one, never once forgetting who had opened the door, but never asking for anything more. He never replied, but he read each one, and after reading, he pinned them on a corkboard in his study. Each letter like a quiet testament to something he hadn't known he needed, a reminder that his world, once cold and calculated, had somehow helped bring something good to life. One evening, his assistant stepped into the study, saw the letters, and asked, "Are these from your niece?" William smiled faintly. "Something like that." Anna continued to thrive. She received top scores on her exams, praise from professors, and invitations to assist in research projects. She joined a mentorship program for immigrant students, offering tutoring sessions to those just beginning the journey she had once feared. And slowly, something changed. Not in her surroundings, but in her. She began to walk taller. She started raising her hand more. She met her professor's eyes. She stopped apologizing when she spoke. It wasn't arrogance. It was arrival. She had once whispered her dream in the dark. Now she stood in brightly lit lecture halls and spoke of medicine, care, and ethics with clarity and strength. One afternoon, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror of the campus library. Hair pulled back neatly, a white coat draped over her arm, textbooks hugged to her chest. She didn't look like a maid anymore. She looked like a future doctor. But more than that, she looked like someone who knew she belonged. And though William never said a word about the letters on his wall, he read them each night, carefully, like scripture. And in his quiet home, once so full of loss, there was now a soft, steady presence, the knowledge that somewhere Anna was becoming exactly who she was meant to be, not because of him, but because someone had finally believed she could. The car pulled into the long gravel driveway, crunching softly beneath the tires. The estate hadn't changed much. The ivy still curled around the white columns, the windows still gleamed in the afternoon sun, and the garden bloomed with the same quiet elegance Anna remembered. But something inside her had shifted completely. She stepped out, straightened her blazer, and took a deep breath. 4 years. 4 years since she had walked this path with a mop in one hand and a lunch bag in the other. 4 years since she'd quietly scrubbed floors, cooked meals, folded sheets, and studied at night, holding on to a fragile dream. Now she returned not as a maid, but as a graduate of medical school, a doctor in training, a woman shaped by grit, pain, and relentless faith. She rang the bell. The door opened slowly, and there he was. William, a little older now, the lines on his face a bit deeper, his hair grayer, but his eyes the same, warm, watchful. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then he smiled. "Anna," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. She smiled back. "Hello, Mr. Duval." "No more, sir?" She shook her head, laughing gently. "Not today." He stepped aside. "Come in." She entered the house she had once cleaned from top to bottom, but now she saw it differently. Not as a place she served, but one that had silently witnessed her transformation. They walked through the hallway, down to the conservatory, where the sunlight still poured across the tiled floor. He poured tea without asking, just like he used to, and handed her a cup. They sat. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence was familiar now, comfortable, shared. Finally, William said, "I kept all your letters." Anna looked up. "They're still on the wall," he added, his gaze distant. "When the house feels too quiet, I read them again." Her throat tightened. "I never knew if you read them." He chuckled. "Every single one. Twice." She smiled, eyes soft. "Thank you for everything. I wouldn't have made it without your belief." "You made it," he said, "because you refused not to." They fell into stories after that, of school, of long nights studying, of her first patient, of the hospital where she would start her residency. William listened, hands wrapped around his cup, occasionally nodding, occasionally laughing. Then he asked, gently, "Do you ever regret leaving? She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "No," she said, "because what I found on the way back was me." He nodded once, deeply, as if those words filled something in him he hadn't known was empty. The sun dipped lower, painting the room in amber. They sat in the glow, not as employer and employee, not as billionaire and maid, but as something else. Something unspoken, but deeply real. And in the quiet between them something passed. Not love declared, not promises made, but a recognition of all they had walked through, of all they had become, and the possibility of what might still be. The auditorium was packed, the lights warm and the applause deafening. Anna stood at the podium in her graduation gown, hands trembling slightly around the edges of the speech she had written and rewritten 100 times. Her white coat now bore her name stitched in clean black letters, Dr. Anna Mee Santos, and her heart beat not with fear, but with something stronger, quiet certainty. She took a breath and looked out at the sea of faces, fellow graduates, proud families, professors and sponsors, and somewhere near the back, in the shadows, sat William. He didn't wave, he didn't stand, but he was there, as he always had been. Anna leaned forward into the microphone. "I wasn't born into a life of opportunity," she began. "I was born into a small home where dreams were often too expensive to afford." A hush fell over the crowd. "I grew up watching illness take away the people I loved, not because there weren't cures, but because we couldn't reach them. And for a long time I believed my job was simply to survive." She paused, eyes searching for courage in the silence. "But then, one day, someone saw me. Not for what I did, not for where I came from, but for what I could become." She smiled, soft and steady. "There was a man who saw me, not as a maid, but as a story waiting to be told. And he gave me the one thing that can't be bought, belief." A murmur rippled through the audience, but Anna didn't flinch. "That belief changed everything, and now I stand here not just as a doctor, but as proof that kindness can be the seed of something extraordinary." The standing ovation lasted minutes, but Anna didn't hear it. Her eyes had already found him. William, still seated, not clapping but smiling, a slow, proud smile that reached his eyes. Months later, Anna opened her first community clinic in a modest building in Queens. It wasn't glamorous, just 5 rooms, a small waiting area, and a mural painted by local kids on the side wall. But it was full of patients, of volunteers, of hope. She offered checkups to undocumented families, prenatal care to mothers who couldn't afford hospitals, vaccines for children who'd fallen through the cracks. Her staff was small, her budget tighter than ever, but her doors were always open. She named it Project Hiwaga, Tagalog for wonder, a tribute to the mystery of how life, despite everything, could still bloom. No donor names were printed on the plaque, but Anna knew. William funded the equipment, covered the rent, sent monthly donations through anonymous channels. When she thanked him, through letters, voicemails, messages he never answered, he simply continued. Quietly, one autumn afternoon, Anna invited him to visit. He arrived at closing hour, dressed in a simple coat, looking slightly thinner, a little slower, but his eyes still carried that steady gaze she'd come to trust. They sat on a bench outside the clinic, watching a group of children play with sidewalk chalk, drawing suns and stick figures and dreams. Neither spoke for a while. Then Anna said, "They think the building is magic." William raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" She smiled. "In a way, it was built on something stronger than concrete." He looked at her for a long moment, then reached for her hand. For just a moment, he held it. No words, no movement, just stillness. Then he let go. But in his eyes was everything she needed to know. That he had never stopped believing in her. That he had never wanted anything in return. That maybe, just maybe, love didn't always need to be spoken aloud to be real. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. The children laughed louder. The mural caught the sunset. And 2 people, once strangers in a kitchen lit by a single bulb, sat quietly, witnessing the life they'd built together, in different ways, for the same reason. Some stories don't end in love. Some begin with it, and simply keep growing. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey, one that began in silence, under the dim glow of a kitchen light, and unfolded into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Anna and William's story isn't just about success or sacrifice. It's about seeing someone, truly seeing them, not for where they are, but for where they're capable of going. It's about the kind of love that doesn't always need to be named, but is felt deeply in the quiet moments of belief, support, and unwavering care. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories, where every week we bring you more true-to-life tales of hope, resilience, compassion, and the unexpected beauty of human connection. Your next favorite story is just one click away. Until next time, keep believing in others and in yourself.